What's up, guys? Alex Scott here with JamPlay.com. Welcome to another awesome live course we've got for you guys. This is Bass Guitar 101, okay? So hopefully all you guys out there have joined us today to sort of get an introduction to this wonderful, wonderful instrument we call the bass guitar. Now, of course, this course is open to anybody, any ability level, anything like that. But it's mainly going to be geared towards getting introduced to the instrument and really kind of starting from square one. Sort of geared towards guys who have never played an instrument before, or maybe are coming over from guitar or piano or drums, something like that. Just get you kind of acquainted with this guy here, the bass guitar. So we've got 10 awesome weeks of lessons ahead of you. We got a bunch of backing tracks that we're going to start playing along with coming up next week. This week we are starting pretty much right at the beginning. I'm going to go over what exactly this thing is, some history behind it. We're going to take a look at all the different bits and bobs and pieces and components and all that stuff, look at what everything does. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how to maintain the instrument, how to tune it, all that kind of stuff, as well as how to hold it properly, where to put your hands, some really basic playing techniques, and we're going to start making a little bit of sound. So yeah, like I said, we've got 10 weeks ahead of us. I'm going to be with you guys every step of the way as we go through and kind of start with the basics, and then we're going to move into backing tracks, like I said, which is going to be a ton of fun. We're going to get you guys working with professional studio musicians pretty much right off the bat, playing through a bunch of different styles and all kinds of fun stuff. So I know I'm really excited to be here. I hope you guys are too. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. So without further ado, I suppose let's jump right in and start taking a look at what exactly I have in front of me here. Now, I'm sure if you guys are here, or maybe current JamPlay subscribers on guitar or something like that, you guys will know this is a bass guitar. It is in the guitar family. It has 4 strings, obviously. It was invented predominantly. There were sort of a few ideas earlier on in the 20th century, but the first guy to really put it together in the shape that looks a lot like what we have now was a gentleman by the name of Leo Fender. I'm sure a few of you might recognize that name. And in 1951, Leo kind of looked around at a lot of the changes that were happening at that point, sort of historically speaking, in music. In the early 50s was a really, really interesting time because you had a lot of innovation coming, sort of industrial innovation coming out of the tail end of World War II and sort of everything that happened there. We got together as a country and designed and built a lot of really new, cool stuff. Among those things were a lot of new innovations in electronics. And so Leo Fender kind of looked around and said, okay, well, we've got kind of all the music that has happened up to this point. So you had, obviously going way back in history, we had started with classical music. And then that sort of moved in. We had folk songs and some of the really, really early sort of country, Americana stuff, European folk music. All this stuff started to come together, and of course, for the first half, of the 20th century, we had jazz, which was the popular music, pop music of the time. Now, jazz traditionally was performed with drums, piano, often a lot of horns, trumpet, trombone, clarinet, saxophone, tenor sax, alto sax, all that stuff. And the sort of low end was held down in traditional jazz settings by the upright bass, or the double bass, which you guys might know, the real big guy, like a cello, but even bigger. Well, as time progressed on, people were starting to get away from swing and traditional jazz, and we started to see the earliest burgeonings of rock and roll music. Well, people very quickly encountered a problem. They really needed that low-end fundamental, which the upright bass provided in jazz, but the issue kind of lay in the fact that if anybody out there has ever been around or used an upright bass before, played one, been around one, you probably know that they are not the world's loudest instrument, especially when you put them up next to a drum set or an electric guitar player. So guys were having a lot of problems, with amplification coming around and clubs getting bigger, and rock music was really starting to become a thing. Things were getting louder. The upright bass just couldn't compete. It was really difficult to put a microphone on it because there wasn't anywhere really to mount it, because it's such a vibrational instrument. Feedback was a really big problem right off the bat. So Leo Fender already had a fair amount of experience designing electric guitars, some of the earlier electric guitars. So he sort of took the same principles and decided to apply them to the upright bass, just as a number of different guys had done with the guitar. You had classical or nylon string guitars and steel string acoustic guitars that were, obviously from 1800s onwards, in the sort of form and fashion that we know them today. And a lot of guys at the beginning of the 20th century made the same transition. They said, well, let's try to put some pickups on this and see if we can plug it into something, make it a little bit louder, so we had the electric guitar. Leo Fender took the same mentality and applied it to the bass. Said, well, let's design a pickup system. Let's, make it a guitar, but it needs to be a little bit longer for the lower pitch strings, and let's see what we can get done. So that's sort of where it came from. Now, he sort of started it, and we've since had countless innovators of this instrument. I mean, started with him with a very, very simple 4 strings, 1 pickup, 1 knob kind of a situation, and since then we've gone on to, now we have 5 string, 6 string, even 7 and beyond string basses, all kinds of different tunings, different types of electronics, hardware, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's really grown as an instrument over the past, 65 years since it was invented. So that's sort of where it came from, and it really speaks to the role of the instrument in a band, which is something that we're going to be talking about a lot over the next 10 weeks, because to me, one of the, if anybody comes to me as like a private student, one of the first things that I tell them every time is, playing bass is not nearly as much about, just kind of learning songs and jamming along. You can absolutely do that, and I never discourage anybody from doing that. But it's not quite like the guitar, in the sense that somebody can really just pick it up and learn a couple of shapes and play some of their favorite songs and sing along. Again, you can do that with bass, and I don't discourage it. I think it's great, and whatever you get as far as enjoyment out of the instrument goes, then absolutely everybody should be playing music. But for any serious students of the bass, I always talk a lot, and if you guys watch my videos on the website, JamPlay, I talk a ton about the role of the bass in music. And it gets back to its invention, why Leo Fender invented it in the first place, which is all bands, all music, generally speaking, need that low fundamental. They need an instrument that sits in a lower register, lower pitched notes, than anything else in the band, and it really provides kind of a foundation, a backbone, if you will, to all of the other stuff that's going on stage. So, obviously bass, very low end, you're sitting beneath the guitar, pitch-wise, you're sitting usually beneath a piano player, beneath a singer, beneath horns. You get way, way down there. And what that does is you kind of sit, the notes that you play sit on the bottom of the chord that the rest of the band is playing, and you're providing a solid foundation as far as the notes go. The second thing that you're doing is providing rhythmic interaction and sort of a rhythmic backbone along with the drummer. So you can kind of look at the bass guitar as glue that sits in between the drums and the rest of the band. We sort of sit back and we drive the bus, as I like to say. So it's a really, really fun instrument for that reason. It can be a very challenging instrument for that reason as well, because it's a little bit trickier to just pick up and kind of learn a couple simple patterns and then start playing. Because we don't usually play chords, and you usually don't just see a solo bass guitar player performing anywhere. There are a couple out there that do it, but it's not a typical thing. We're almost always either on a recording session or just generally we're functioning as a part of a larger group of musicians. Not very typical to see guys just doing it solo bass. But yeah, so that's sort of how I'm going to approach the next 10 weeks for you guys, as well as just kind of a general outline of why this instrument is so important. And honestly, what excites me so much about it, it's the reason that I started playing bass, was because you look at guitar and piano, and they're wonderful instruments. I'll never knock them, but there's just something in the challenge of being that foundation. You know, you really kind of can't screw up ever. You have to really know what you're doing and really understand, you know, like music theory and all these kinds of things to really grasp how to be a great bass player. So it's a unique challenge in that sense. If you're somebody who likes a challenge, or somebody who finds themselves drawn towards, you know, an idea like music theory and really learning about chords and scales and all this kind of stuff, the bass guitar is really going to speak to you, I think. And not to mention, as a side note, if you've ever considered music a career, there are a whole lot of guitar players out there. There really aren't that many bass players. So we tend to work a lot more, which is also kind of neat if you're choosing to do it as a profession. But I digress. So let's go ahead and move into talking a little bit about the instrument itself. So like I said back at the beginning, we've got 4 strings. This bass that I have with me today is a really classic example of just a very simple standard bass guitar. This sort of style of instrument is usually referred to as a precision bass or P bass, and it's very much based on the original, you know, kind of most simple bass that Leo Fender created back in 1951. So we'll sort of start at this end down here and work our way up the instrument. And I'll just talk a little bit about each piece that you guys see here, so you have a little bit better idea of what they all do. So, sort of more general parts here. The whole thing is called the body, big slab of wood that everything else is sort of mounted to. First component is the bridge, which is this whole system here. And as part of the bridge, you have saddles, these little rectangles here that each string sits on. Now, there's a little groove carved out that the string sits inside, and this provides, this particular one's made out of brass. This just provides a solid metal contact point for the string to rest on. Now, you can adjust these saddles up and down to raise or lower the distance of the strings off of the fingerboard up here. We call this action, okay? So saying that you have a low or a high action on your instrument refers to how far off the fingerboard your strings are. That's all adjusted down here. Moving up from there, we have our pickup. This is technically 2 pickups, but they're wired together. They work as one. This section here works for your lower strings. This section down here works for your higher strings. Okay? Now this big shiny gray thing is the pick guard. So if we're playing with a pick, right, it can kind of dig into the body. This protects against that, so it kind of keeps your instrument in better condition. Right here, we have our volume knob. On almost all bass guitars, this is where your volume knob is going to be located. It's typically the knob closest to where your hands are as far as playing. Now, over here, this second knob is what we call the tone knob. This is another very common feature of basses. What this does is it takes the treble frequencies of the instrument, so the real high-end frequencies, and it turns them down so that you're only getting the real low end. So here, maybe you guys can hear a little bit. Open it all the way up. You can hear a little bit of rattle there, yeah? Sort of a brightness. Turn it all the way down. It's much mellower. All those high frequencies are gone. You can think of this knob a lot like the treble knob on your car stereo or on your home stereo. So the pickups and these knobs down here, we refer to this whole thing as the electronics in the bass, because they're the electrical components that allow you to plug it in via the jack here in our guitar cable into your amplifier or speaker or, you know, really anything else. So that's kind of the general gist of the body of the bass. Now, moving a little bit further up here, obviously we have our strings, pretty important. This whole thing is our neck, right? And on the front of the neck or on the top of the neck is the fretboard or fingerboard. Okay. Now, as you guys can see, it's pretty shiny. it's been finished very, very smooth to make playing and pressing the strings down very easy and comfortable, and moving up and down the neck very easy and comfortable. You don't want rough wood down in there. Now, obviously we have our frets here, which are the metal bars. This is what the string rests against. So if we push down, that's obviously how you get your changes in pitch and how you play all your different notes, is by fretting. So you also have dots, okay? These black dots all the way up to help you remember kind of where you are on the instrument. So we have dots at the 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, and 12th fret. And then it goes on up from there, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17. A lot of basses will have a dot here at the 19th fret, and we have a total of 20. Now, the more acquainted you guys get with playing the bass, the more 3, 5, 7, 9, and 12 are going to make a little bit more sense. It has to do with the notes that are available at those positions, but that's a little bit further down the road, so we won't worry about that right now. Now, getting back to what I was talking about just a moment ago with the action that we had adjusted down on the bridge, if I turn this guy sideways, you can see just that little tiny bit of space in between the strings in the fretboard, right? I generally personally like to have that as low as possible. If you are just starting playing and you're noticing it's really, really difficult to push the strings down onto the fretboard, or it's really difficult to pluck the strings, that's one of the first places you should look. And again, that can all be adjusted down here on your bridge. It's something I see very, very commonly on cheaper student instruments or people who are just getting started. Is they don't know about something like that, and so their action ends up really, really, really high, and it makes the instrument extremely difficult to play, and they get discouraged, and they say, oh, this thing is really hard, and it's actually just because their instrument isn't set up properly. So something to definitely keep in mind for you guys. Moving a little bit further up our neck here, this is another very important component. This little white guy is called the nut. This is made out of bone, typically, or sometimes it can be made out of graphite or brass, but most typically they're made out of bone or high-density plastic. And this is sort of the same thing as our bridge is, just at the top. So it's the other point that the string rests on to sort of allow it to vibrate freely. Now up here we have our headstock, is this whole top bit. We have our tuning machines. This is what we're going to use to tune our instrument. Okay, these spin, and we'll change the string of each, change the tuning, the pitch of each respective string. Okay, and this little guy is a string tree, which helps keep some tension on the strings so that they don't buzz and so they sit correctly on the instrument. So that's a good overview of the whole instrument and all the different pieces and components that you guys are going to need to know about. And by the way, guys, along with this entire series, I didn't mention this a little bit earlier, we have a very, very cool new thing that we're bringing you from JamPlay. We have what we're calling guided practice lessons, okay? So everything that I talk about each week in our live lesson, I've done a compendium that's available on the website. So if you're not already a full subscriber to JamPlay, I definitely recommend going over there and signing up, because you will get access to, not only the thousands and thousands of really incredible guitar and bass lessons already on there, but these guided practice sessions for these lessons. So as we get into working with the backing tracks, the guided practice is going to walk you through. We have all the tracks at a couple of different tempos that you guys can play along with. And for this particular lesson, the guided practice has all this information in it, pretty much in the same format. So if you guys are curious about learning a little bit more, or need a reminder on any of the names for anything like that, just pop over there to the JamPlay website and find the guided practice for our Bass Guitar 101 session, and it should help you guys out.
Okay, we have a few questions
Excellent.
related to what you were just talking about with the different parts there. So here's one from St. Joe 319.
Hello, St. Joe.
What about a third knob? I have 3.
Indeed. Very good question. First of all, thank you very much for tuning in. We definitely appreciate you. So if you have 3 knobs, you probably have what we call a jazz bass, which is very, very similar to this, but you'll have two separate pickups. Okay, here I just have this one main one, right? You'll have one up here and one down here. Now those knobs will do one of two things. They'll either be a separate volume knob for each pickup. So if we pretend that I have three knobs, let's say I have one knob right here, right? This would be the volume knob for the pickup that's closest to the neck. The second knob would be the volume knob for the one closest to the bridge. Okay? And then your third knob is going to be the same as mine here, which is a tone knob. Now, the other way they do them sometimes is that one will be an overall volume, and then the next knob will blend in between. So you rotate it all the way one direction, it'll select one pickup, and then as you move it over, it'll start blending the two and then move it up to the other pickup. So that is probably why you have three knobs. And there are probably quite a few of you out there who are using a jazz type bass and have that. So that's sort of what that is for you. I generally, when I was starting out, or when I have students that are starting out, I don't tell them to worry about the knobs too much. Just turn them all the way up. That's generally what they're kind of designed to do. So I'd say that that's a pretty safe starting bet. If your bass doesn't have batteries in it. Some nicer basses do. Don't turn those all the way up. But that's a whole separate story. If your bass doesn't have batteries, just turn all your knobs all the way up. Don't worry about it till a little bit further down the road. You'll start to figure out what they do. You have any other folks wanting to jump in?
Yeah, we have a couple more here.
Excellent.
Dance and Diane asks, why are the pickups offset?
Hello, Dance and Diane. Thanks for tuning in. The pickups on this bass are offset. It's kind of tricky to answer without getting into the actual physics of how the strings vibrate, but it makes them sound more consistent, essentially. Yeah, it's a complicated physics thing, but yeah, that's without getting like way deep into like harmonic overtones and all kinds of crazy stuff. They were designed that way for good reason. It just basically makes all four strings sound more similar to each other, is the easiest way to think about it. But thank you very much for the question. We appreciate it.
Okay. And she's got a couple of questions. So
okay.
Thanks a lot, Nancy and Diane.
Excellent.
These are
No
great
worries.
questions.
Happy to help.
Why are the tuning pegs so big? Just for fun, or is there a reason?
Partially just for fun. I mean, I think it's an aesthetic thing, but there is also quite a bit of tension on these. I mean, they're not like crazy difficult to tune, but you do have to apply some force. So having, especially on a bass, since they're lower strings, they're actually under a higher tension. If you look at the PSI tension on the strings, you have a lot more than you would have on a guitar. So it gives you a little bit more surface area to grab onto and manipulate them a little bit easier. But these particular ones are this clover shape, as they call it, and it is an aesthetic thing, as well as a functional thing. So, yeah.
Okay, here's another good one.
Okay.
From her. So bass does not have selector switches like guitars?
Bass, no. Generally, basses do not have selector switches. If they do, they usually do other things. Normally a selector switch, like on a Stratocaster guitar or a Telecaster guitar, the switch is how you select what pickups you're using. On a bass, we usually do that with knobs. Switches on a bass will usually be something like doing different stuff with the pickups. Again, kind of technical stuff, but generally no, basses do not usually have switches. There are some, but again, technical kind of advanced stuff. But no, they don't work quite like guitars in that sense, because you can actually get a lot more tonal variation out of different pickup combinations in a bass than you can with a guitar, which is why the guitars opt for the switches. Because if you have just this one or just this one, there's a big difference, but the minute blending of the two on a guitar doesn't do a whole lot, whereas on a bass, you can really get a whole lot of different sounds out of your instrument just by blending two different pickups, which is why the knobs are a little bit better. So yes, that would be a little more info there. Great questions, guys. Thanks again very, very much for jumping in on that. So let's go ahead and move now towards talking a little bit about how we hold this dang thing. So I know that can be a little intimidating it's a pretty big instrument, significantly bigger than a guitar. So when you're sitting down for it the first time, especially coming from a guitar player's perspective, you're like, man, this thing is huge. The neck is really long. The strings are also far apart. The strings are just really big and they're harder to push down. It can be a little bit intimidating, but fear not, because I have a very, very simple system, that I've sort of invented to help everybody understand what exactly correct technique looks like. And it's really, really easy. So we'll start, first of all, with our whole kind of body position. And this should be pretty familiar to any guitar players out there. But generally, if you're right, we're going to be talking about everything from being right hand dominant. So lefties, just sort of invert what I'm saying, and it'll apply for you too. You're going to want to rest the instrument on your right leg, the leg of your dominant arm. Sometimes guitar players will do this. We really don't ever do that as a bass player, because we don't, pick like that. We pick like this. So dominant leg, right leg. Got this nice big cutout here. That should rest comfortably and sit up against your body. Your right arm. Most basses will have a nice rounded section right here. So your right arm should just sit naturally on top of that. For now, just let your hand kind of relax and just, like an armrest on a chair almost, just kind of hanging out there. Now, your left hand is going to come up here, and this is obviously where we're going to be doing our fretting. So that's the number one thing, is from a guitar perspective, a lot of times guitar players will wrap the thumb over the top to help them fret. And because the neck is a little bit smaller, the strings are smaller, or to help them mute strings, right? We really try to avoid doing that on the bass. We're going to get into the big differences between bass and guitar technique here. You certainly can do this on a bass. I do it from time to time. But correct bass technique, we usually don't do that. And we definitely don't fret like that. And if you try to do it, you'll notice that it's a lot less comfortable to do this on a bass than it is on a guitar. What we're aiming for with our left hand on the bass is, if we just bring our hand out in front of us and act like we're going to reach out and pick up a sandwich, tasty turkey sandwich, right? I'll hold it about like that. Here, I've got a phone right here that I can sort of use for demonstration. So we use our thumb on one side, right? And then our forefingers on the other side. Now, if we take this same shape, okay, just real loose, natural, or maybe like a taco would be another good kind of a thing. We can take that whole shape. Your thumb is going to go right in the middle of your neck. Now, a lot of basses will have this wooden stripe along the bottom. Now, this is to help keep the instrument stable, but it also helps us cheat a little bit because it gives us a target. If we put our thumb right there, flip it all the way back over, boom, there's our sandwich shape, right? Oh, other camera. There we go. So we start, here's our nice, natural, relaxed, eating a sandwich. Bring that right over, thumb smack in the middle of the back of the neck, and then our other four fingers just very naturally resting over the strings. And this is what's going to let us get up and down the neck. Now, a good idea going forward is to sort of assign one finger to each fret. This is going to be a little bit difficult starting out because it's a little bit of a stretch, especially if you have smaller hands. That's kind of eventually what we're going for. But for now, don't worry about that. Really, we're just going for this kind of a nice, natural, relaxed shape. Throughout all of this, the most important thing is that your hands stay as relaxed as they possibly can. Because the less relaxed your hands are, the more tensed up and sort of agitated they are. As you start practicing an instrument, from the first day that you pick it up, you're teaching your muscles new skills. And, muscle memory. Everybody's heard of muscle memory, in sports and stuff like that. So if you start and you're doing crazy, weird stuff with your fingers, you're going to teach your hands that that's correct. Whether or not you realize that you're doing that, the muscles are going to listen and they're going to start to develop habits right off the bat. And if those habits are stressed out, not properly relaxed, you're going to build that into your technique, and that's what you really want to avoid. So throughout all of that, if you ever feel your hand really tensing up or cramping, starting out, it's going to be some work getting used to fretting the strings. So obviously we're going to be using our hand, but I'm talking, any weird positions or fingers that start to kind of hurt, stuff like that. Stop, bring it back to your sandwich. Reach out, grab your sandwich, take a bite, and put it back on. And just make sure that your fingers are nice and just relaxed. It's the most important thing. So that's our left hand, right? How about our right hand? The right hand is arguably just as simple. We basically, for bass, we usually use these two fingers, index and middle, on our right hand or our dominant hand. And these are going to alternate for plucking. Now, what does that look? Oh, that looks like a little man walking up your neck. That is very good bass technique. Should look just like a little dude walking up the side of your instrument. So you take that same shape, bring it down here, and you let your little man walk across your strings, and then back down. Or he walks backwards. Or we can just drag one finger across. But ultimately, the easiest way to start this is to hang your hand totally relaxed, draw in your ring and your pinky, take your thumb, put your thumb on top of the pickup, or some people like to put it up here. Some people even like to rest it on that bottom string. I usually like to go to my pickup. And from here, we're going to make our little guy do his little walk. Again, very, very critical to keep this hand totally relaxed. You want it as relaxed as possible. Drop your thumb down, gently pull those two back fingers in, and then move in, start doing your little walking man. Relaxation, especially in the right hand, is super, super critical. One of the number one things that I see young starting bass players doing is what I call fancy hand. And that is the pinky starts to go crazy, or the pinky in the ring. You'll see a lot of guys doing this kind of action. And their hand gets all wacky and their pinky goes way out. And it looks kind of silly. But you'll see, I'll even see professional guys with technique that looks like that. And you really don't want that because you're putting stress. A really, really important thing to keep in mind here. You have a big group of muscles and tendons that run up your arm like this, called your extensors. And you can actually, really fun experiment, if you grab right here and you move, you can actually see on the camera when I do that, you can see all that stuff in here moving. Okay? Everything that controls your fingers goes all the way up your arm. And it's really, really important to keep all this stuff relaxed and healthy and happy, because that's going to be the number one thing that's going to cause you to cramp up or, just generally develop really, really bad technique. So we don't want any fancy hand, crazy pinky going anywhere. We don't want big, stiff, angry wooden stick fingers doing anything. We just want to hang our hand real natural, drop it down, drop that thumb on the pickup, bring our pinky and ring in, and just start doing our little walking man. So that's kind of our exercise for today, is not, trying to learn patterns or scales or anything like that. Since we're just starting out, we're not even really going to worry that much about the left hand beyond just keeping it up here and getting used to sort of having it resting on the back of the neck like this. So don't even worry about trying to push down quite yet, although you can, certainly. Always good practice. But mostly just at the very beginning here, just starting out, focus on this right hand. Anchor that thumb. Anchor the thumb on your left hand here. And then just start plucking these strings open with your little walking man. Don't worry about muting them or letting them ring. Just start getting used to the feeling of using your finger to sound the string. You can try a little alternating action. again, go slow. We're not trying to be crazy speed demons here. We're really focused on just teaching our hand, hey, this is how you relax while we're doing this. That's what you want to be telling your hand throughout this whole first stage of just getting used to this instrument is, yes, we're asking you hands and fingers to do something new, this whole new task and new idea, but, make sure that you're as relaxed as possible while doing it. And can't talk today. Your fingers will learn that is the appropriate way for them to move, and you build a really great foundation for having really, really solid hand technique going forward, which makes it much easier to play faster, makes it easier to play cleaner, and really get a good tone out of the instrument because, there's a common misconception that if you want to sound good, you need a $1,000 bass guitar, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 bass guitar, whatever. You can't sound good until you have ... And that is totally not true. This bass, this is not a lie to you guys, this bass was made in 1978, cost me $150 on Craigslist. And I'm not kidding. It's one of my favorite basses to play. I've played this on stages in front of 5,000, 10,000 people many times. $150 junk bass you could find in a pawn shop. You set it up right, and you know what you're doing, that's where your tone is going to come from. Don't ever let anybody tell you, oh, well, yeah, but you're not really a musician until you spend X dollars or until you have a American shop custom this, that, or the... Nope. Again, this Korean-made import bass from the late 70s, $150. Most guys would look at this and go, God, what a piece of junk. I love it. And every gig I play on, people go, wow, that thing sounds incredible. It's all in your fingers. It's all in having good, relaxed, natural technique and good, relaxed, natural approach to playing the instrument. That's where your tone and your sound is going to come from. So that's sort of our little technique primer. We talked about a little bit about the history, moved into all the components, and now that's a little bit of technique for you guys. So that's going to be sort of your homework until next week, is just getting used to this feeling right here. Exactly what I'm doing. Just boom, left hand, thumb in the middle, wrapped around, nice, comfortable, relaxed. Excuse me. Right hand, thumb anchored, pinky and ring retracted, index in middle, doing the little walking man across your strings. That's all we're worrying about this first week. And over the next week, every day that you pick your instrument up, just be aware that's all you got to worry about. Don't try to stress yourself out and get too far. If you guys want to start experimenting with fretting, I always tell people to start with their middle finger because it's generally already the strongest. Just pick a fret, play your string open, then push that fret down and play the note, and then release it. Move to the next string. Open, push the fret down, play the note. Next string down. Open, push down the fret. Now we just want to make sure that you're getting good pressure when you're pushing down, and that's why we leave our thumb in the middle of the back of the neck, because it allows us to almost pinch the string. Instead of trying to leave our thumb floating, say, and push all the way down. That's hard even for me. But when you anchor your thumb in the middle of the back of that neck, you can just pinch, like you're, Mr. Miyagi grabbing a fly out of midair or something. Right? And get used to that feeling. And what you'll find is that as time goes on, you'll develop really big calluses on these two fingers, and you'll develop really big calluses on the tips of these fingers from constantly fretting and constantly plucking the strings. And the more you get used to these actions, the more comfortable and the more relaxed it's going to become. But as you're starting, again, your main focus should be keeping your hands relaxed. No tension, no tightness, no crazy Skeksis hands. No, relaxed, and you should be good to go. So let's jump back over and wrap up with a little bit of questioning here, if there's anybody who wants to jump in. Again, any questions about bass or music or anything, we're always happy to help.
Okay, yeah, we've got a few, and everybody just keep them coming in. keep on having more pop up. That's great. So here's one from MS Bluesman.
Indeed, greetings.
PV Dyno Bass has a switch for the active pickups. Do you know how the knobs work on it?
Generally, when you're talking about active pickups, so that's, I mentioned earlier, if your bass has a battery, your situation might be a little bit different. And this is exactly what I was talking about. I'm not familiar with the dyno in particular, but any active bass is going to work the same way, and they're active for one main reason. That's that they actually have a full equalizer on them. So this bass just has the tone knob, because there's no batteries. This is all just a passive electronic system. No batteries, no power. It's just strings and a magnet, the pickup, and the string moves back and forth. You've got the magnet, makes a magnetic field, right? As the string moves in that's what makes the current that goes down the cable. In an active bass, you put the battery in so that you actually have a proper EQ. Now, again, in your car stereo, you're probably already used to this. You might have a treble knob and a bass knob, or maybe even a middle knob as well for the middle frequencies. And you can turn them up and down. On this bass, we can only turn just the treble down, right? On an active bass, you might have a switch to turn it on and off, and then you'll have 3 knobs, usually. In addition to your volume knob and your pickup knob, your pickup selector, or 2 volume knobs for 2 pickups, you'll have 3 EQ knobs. A bass knob to turn up or down the low frequencies, a middle knob to turn up or down the middle frequencies, and then a treble knob to turn up or down the highest frequencies. You usually want those to be in the middle. You don't want them turned all the way up. You don't want them turned all the way down. You want them right in the middle. And most knobs on basses like that, well, you'll feel a little click. They call it a detent, where the knob will kind of stop and click into place, and you can move it either direction. Find your knobs that do that and set those in that click, in that center detent. So just move them around until you feel that and leave your knob there. If that doesn't seem to be doing it for you on that particular bass, just Google it. YouTube and Google are incredible resources for learning anything and everything about any of this stuff. So I would just look up, I guarantee you there's 1,000 forum posts out there about the PV dyno and how exactly the electronics work. But as a general rule of thumb, if you know your bass has active pickups, it's going to be an EQ, a bass knob, middle knob, and a treble knob. So that's my answer. Thanks again, man. Appreciate you guys tuning in.
Okay. From Dancing Diane, are all basses the same size? And she also added, for smaller people.
Sure, absolutely. Great question,
one
Diane.
Size fits all?
So no, not necessarily. Usually how we measure instruments is in what we call the scale length, which isn't the actual physical size of the instrument, but the distance from the nut to the bridge, because that's effectively like the length of your string. Even though your string is, down here, this bit's just anchored. You can't, there's no sound happening down there, and there's certainly no sound happening down here. So effectively your string is this long. And yes, they absolutely make smaller basses. They are called short scale basses. I know of one in particular that I am a big fan of that is about $150 at Guitar Center. It's called the Squier Bronco. Squier by Fender, actually surprisingly good instruments for the price, and they make one called the Bronco, which this bass right here is a 34-inch scale length. So from the nut to the bridge is almost exactly 34 inches. The Bronco is a scant 30 inches, so it's that much shorter. It's almost the same scale length as a guitar. Guitar is typically 28 or 29 inches. The Bronco is 30. So if you are maybe a little bit younger, kid 10, 11, 12 years old, something like that, or if you have, for the gals, people with a little bit smaller hands, maybe a little bit shorter, I would highly recommend going out and picking up a short scale bass. They make them at all price points, really, really nice, all the way down to really basic student instruments. And if you're having trouble doing these stretches, definitely I would recommend going and get a short scale, because it'll be a lot easier for you to play. I actually have a short scale that I play on gigs just because it's so comfortable. It's a little bit smaller, so it's easier to travel with. So yeah, they make 34s, they make 30s, and then all the way up to 36 inches, I believe, is the longest scale length you'll really find a bass guitar in. So, and they even make now these little basses that are the size of ukuleles, called uke basses, that are really, really cool. And those are like this big. The whole instrument's it's a ukulele. So those are kind of fun too. But yes, if you're looking for something a little bit easier to manage, short scale bass is what you're going to want to search for. Thanks again, Diane. Really, really great questions. I really appreciate it.
Okay, here's another one. Do you have a recommendation for which strings we should use?
Indeed. Greetings. Thanks for tuning in. You know, I personally really like Diodarios. That's what I use on all my basses. They seem to just have a little bit more tone than other strings, but that is totally my personal preference. There's 1,000 really, really great companies out there. There's Diodario, there's DR Strings, there's Jim Dunlop, Ernie Ball. Even there's a local Colorado company here called Kurt Mangan that makes really, really nice strings. Really anything. You know, when you're just starting out, I'd recommend cheap and easy because they're cheap and they're easy. You know, don't worry about going and getting some crazy, you know, Elixir Nano Web technology, some, you know, $20-$30 for a set of strings. That's what I use, but I also play 220 shows a year, so I need them to stand up to a lot. When you're just getting started out, I generally say cheaper is better because you're probably going to break a couple of them on accident. That's totally okay. Breaking a string does not hurt your instrument. Don't worry. Bass strings are actually really funny when they break because they don't do what guitar strings do and fly off. They just go totally slack. They just go boom, and they're still attached, but it's funny if you ever break a string on a bass. But yeah, I generally say like Ernie Ball Super Slinkies are really good. I think they're about $10 a set. Really, really great strings, especially for the money for a beginner. So just go down to Guitar Center, ask them, or your local music store. You know, whatever suits you. So that'd be my recommendation there. Thank you very much, man. We got anybody else jumping in?
Yeah, we've got one more currently. So if you guys have any other questions, get them up here.
Indeed.
From Boondock Saint 408. Anything wrong with using your thumb and 3 fingers?
Wrong? No, absolutely not. I would start here still if you are a new bass player because using it's sort of a flamenco style technique, which I do like that, right? So we're going ring, middle, index, thumb. You can absolutely do that. I do it all the time. It's a pretty advanced technique, and it takes a lot of practice and finesse to be able to get all 4 of those fingers to totally cooperate. I mean, I've been playing bass for 14, 15 years now, and I have just recently started to be able to really fully incorporate. And see, I even still struggle with it a little bit. Yeah, just got away from me. You can absolutely do it. That's a very advanced technique. I would highly recommend if you're just starting out on bass, start with your basic 2, and then you can add your ring or your thumb, and then sort of work your way up to using all 4. Because, I mean, I know from personal experience, there's a bass player by the name of Matthew Garrison who uses that technique and can go incredibly fast and plays these really cool chords and stuff. I really wanted to start there. I tried to start there and got very frustrated very, very quickly because it takes so much finesse to be able to line all those fingers up. So if you're coming from a classical guitar background, if you're coming from somewhere where you're banjo or something where you're really used to doing that, by all means do it. It's gonna give you a huge advantage because you have 4 independent picking surfaces as opposed to 2. However, if you're just starting out on bass or with musical instruments in general, I would definitely recommend starting with just your 2 fingers. Get used to that because that technique, this simple 2-finger plucking, very, very easily turns into, well, you add your thumb, you've got those 3, and then you add your ring, and you're up to your 4-finger picking technique. So that would be my thoughts on that one. Great technique, though, and awesome question. If you can do that, I'm jealous because I'm still working on that 15, 16 years later. So, yes, indeed. Anybody else jumping in at the moment? Okay, cool. Well, let's see here. All right, I suppose then, if you guys would like, I'll just go ahead and sort of play for a moment and kind of show you guys some of the things that you have to look forward to if you decide that this instrument's for you and it's something that you really want to pursue, because, you know, a lot of the time, bass playing is very, very simple. You just start with simple notes. Providing that foundation for the rest of the band. But what else can you do with it? So as you can see, there are about a million different techniques that you can do on bass. If you just get a little bit acquainted with it, there's harmonics, there's slapping, all kinds of really, really fun stuff. You can do some cool chords. And more than anything, what drew me to the bass, in addition to the whole kind of, it being the foundation in a lot of ways and the challenge of that and all that stuff, it's just got such a beautiful, mellow, rich, warm, open sound that can be so expressive. And you can just do so much cool stuff on it. And it's, guitar, you've got 6 strings and they're tuned in such a way that you can play these really big open chords, which is really nice. But there's just something so appealing to me about that sound. It's mellower, it's bigger, it's fatter, it's richer, and it's, I don't know, it just always felt more expressive to me and a lot more engaging just as a sound. You've got this huge low end down here that you can use, but then you can go up high just like a guitar player can. So, I don't know. That's kind of what drew me to the instrument. It's just that sound. And still to this day, I can't get over it. I absolutely adore it. But yeah, so thank you guys again so much for tuning into week 1 here. This has been a great time. Excellent questions from everybody. Really appreciate it. Do we have any last minute questions we want to get in?
Yep, Dance and Diane
Okay,
just had
excellent.
one quick one.
Hello
I
again, Diane.
don't have it in my form yet, but she's just wondering if you said how the bass is tuned.
Good point. I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me, Diane. So your lowest string, or the top string, the string closest to you, is going to be an E, the note E, as in egg. The next string over is going to be an A, okay? The next string over is going to be a D, and the next string over is going to be a G. Now, the more we go through this course, you'll sort of start to understand what those letters mean and how they correspond to the rest of music. E, A, D, G, from pitch low to high, or looking at the bass from the top string to the bottom string. E, A, D, G is how 4-string basses are tuned typically. So look for those letters if you've got a tuner and you're bringing the bass up to tune. E, A, D, G, which any of you guitar players out there will know that is an octave lower than your 4 lowest strings, pitch-wise, on the guitar. So if this were a guitar, shrink it down, squeeze the strings together a little bit, and you would add a B string and an E string, and then raise the whole thing up an octave, and that's a guitar. So from a guitar, you take off those 2 highest pitched strings, and you drop the whole thing down 1 octave. That's how it's tuned. So it's very easy for a guitar player to get acquainted to a bass because you have already played this instrument kind of in a weird way because it's a part of the instrument that you already know. So that's a very useful trick. So yeah, thanks again for reminding me of that, Diane. I almost forgot. That's a pretty important one. Embarrassing. But no, we always appreciate you guys very much tuning in. I know I've had a really great time preparing this course for you guys, doing these guided practice lessons and stuff, and I'm really excited to work with each and every one of you, through the chat and everything and through the website on getting you guys acquainted with the bass, because I love it to death, and I think you guys will too. It's a pretty cool instrument. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys. Couldn't do what we do without you, and we will see you this time next week, every Wednesday. We're Mountain Time here. It's 4 to 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you're over in California, we're going to be starting at 3. If you're in New York, we're going to be starting at 6 p.m. 1 hour long. Bass Guitar 101. Again, my name is Alex Scott. Thank you guys for tuning in here with JamPlay, signing off. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a great day.